How boring. Where are the Kardashians? Who will give me small amounts of instant gratification? And when is my next DM from a potential sugar daddy? This is the world our opposition wants. How boring. We are the Affirmative, Team Parakeet, and support the idea that social media is necessary for a democracy. We define democracy as government by the people, or a rule of majority. Necessary is defined as determined, existing, or happening by natural laws or predestination. In a way, it's just inevitable. And then social media as websites and applications that enable users to create and share content or to participate in social networking. And one additional definition for the term hate speech: communication that carries no meaning other than the expression of hatred for some group, especially in circumstances in which the communication is likely to provoke violence. We have three main arguments to support the affirmative side. One, social media increases political engagement activity. Two, there is an increase in an effective way to address social and political issues. And three, it creates more opportunity to enhance freedom of assembly. Our team definition is social media is necessary for democracy because it's more effective in improving our democratic process. Breaking the points down one by one, voter turnout is good for democracy. And social media increases political participation. In an article by the New York Times, it suggests that a special get the vote out message shows each user's picture of the friends who said they have already voted generated 340,000 additional votes nationwide. If a democracy is a government by the people, then political participation is needed. Therefore, an increase in political participation leads to more effective democracy. Two, the internet is the home of information, where over 56% of the world population is connected, shown by an analysis from Statista, a global survey provider, including social media being the network for interactive discussion. Social media gives people a place to engage in raising concerns, as well as the audience on social media is the largest out of all platforms of media, to which more than 2 billion people just on Facebook, are just on Facebook alone. Meaning that an environmental issue like the Amazon rainforest burning down can be spread throughout the audience, to which can help form democratic engagement in seeking action by government, even raising awareness to bring in efforts from businesses, small and large, who are vital stakeholders in our democracy. And our third and last point, social media provides an opportunity for freedom of assembly. This is directly correlated to our First Amendment's freedom of speech. In order for people to run a democracy effectively, they have to be able to speak their minds, and the people must organize to give greater insight. I have stated our main points concisely and clearly. There's going to be a large amount of claims against our affirmation. I'm sure you are all aware of that because this is a debate. So in light of that, we want to acknowledge these claims ahead of time and say they're not news to us. In fact, we, Team Parakeet, find these attempts to knock us down laughable. One of the biggest claims is there is a large accumulation of false information found on these platforms. So in preparation of that claim, let me ask you what history is. A large amount of information poured in by different people on the same topic with even at times opposing views. So why do we believe it and teach it? Because it can be evaluated. And so can social media with the resources that we have today. Keep that in mind. Throughout the debate, understand that the costs of social media do not outweigh the benefits, such as the points I've established today. And to support our affirmation, social media is necessary for democracy. Thank you.
Democracy has been around much longer than social media. According to Henry Rubinstein, the symbolic birth of our system of government came on September 19, 215 years ago. Washington published his farewell address, marking the country's status as a stable, democratic state. Social media came long after that. It wasn't until the 1980s, according to Keith Terrell, and really the 1990s, that personal computers became more normal, which set the stage for the emergence of social media. We have survived so many years in our democracy without social media. Therefore, our house negates that social media is necessary for democracy. And he made the definition for necessary, and I would like to refute that. Our definition is it must be required or absolutely needed for our democracy to thrive. Today, my house will prove there is more harm done than good through the risk of fake news, to the limited access to social media, and through the private political views that social media brings, and how social media, along with these things, actually hurts and threatens our democracy. The networks that we use for social media actually have more power and control than we think. Social media can control what we can and cannot do on these networks. Think about when something is posted on the internet that exposes an issue to the world. Sometimes those things are taken down by the network controller because they deem it as violating policy. In actuality, nothing is wrong with what was posted. They just don't want anything that might potentially cause controversy, and with that, everyone's voice is not being heard. This is not a good representation of our democracy. According to Mueller of the National Interest, the top 10 big data corporations are in many respects more powerful than nation states. They decide what can be transmitted via the networks, as was seen during the presidential election in 2016. They can allow their networks to be used in a way that certainly influence the outcome. Believe it or not, this does more harm to our democracy than good, giving too many people control over our lives. In our democracy, we will elect people to represent us in the government. We're not giving them full control over our lives, but this is what social media aims to do. Instead of bringing us together, it is dividing us as a country. And with this results in a trust gap between the government and the people. Social media actually makes people distrust the government because of fake news. Technology and social media has caused people to believe things about the government that might not necessarily be true, and it has caused a conflict between the people and the government. Also, according to Mueller, in some cases, governments have blocked websites that they consider to be dangerous. Companies like Facebook block certain content because no one outside of Facebook actually knows what the criteria is for blocking content, nor do they know if Facebook plays with or against the government. This also causes a trust gap between the government and the companies, because there are so many uncertainties in social media on the basis of misinformation. The people and the citizens don't really know who they can trust. In a democracy, the citizens are supposed to be able to trust their elected officials, but they can't do that because of social media. Again, it is doing more harm than good. Everyone is not being represented with social media. Some people say that social media is necessary, meaning we absolutely must have it for democracy because of the representation it provides to minorities. But in fact, it does the total opposite. There's a major problem with social media and certain racial groups in this country. These groups are often the topic or focus of discussion with hate speeches, and then it is justified with freedom of speech, using our democratic values to justify hate and wrongdoings. Intentional misinformation and hate speech is directed towards ethnic and religious groups. Social media is the main platform for that. And social media is one of the main platforms to spread hate, and minorities make up a large majority of receiving this hate. And again, I can't stress this enough. This is hurting our democracy more than it's doing good. Also, some say that social media brings more political engagement for the younger generation, but in actuality, this is not true. In order for someone to look into politics on social media, they have to already have some type of interest in politics to start with. And even when they do decide to look into politics, they won't check the information that is being presented to them. According to Kevin Curry, some research finds that any effects of online news on political participation, such as voting, advocacy, or self-expression, still depend on traditional factors such as how interested in politics someone is to begin with. Research also suggests that the increase in political engagement occurs mostly among those already interested in news and politics. Most people on social media use it for entertainment purposes rather than the political side of social media. According to Kent Brown, most people log into their social media accounts not really to be informed but to be entertained. Though communication might still be an important factor, it would never be effective when people see no entertainment value in it. Social media...
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so we're going to have our first crossfire. It's going to be 2 minutes long. Whenever you're ready.
So early on in your speech, you say that social media wasn't implemented until later. Like, so democracy was first established, and then along with technology advancing, social media came on later. But you failed to explain whether that the social media hurt or actually enhanced the democratic process. You left that out. You didn't say it made it better, you just said we didn't have it until later. Why'd you do that?
Well, during the duration of my speech, I did say how it could harm our democracy through the risk of fake news and through the risk, like, people, the minority groups, they receive hate through social media, and this is not really helping our democracy. It's actually hurting our democracy because, I mean, it's really not necessary.
It's not necessary?
It's not.
So
We actually need it to survive.
So the 340,000 additional votes from Facebook alone was unnecessary? 340,000 additional votes nationwide was accumulated because of people sharing "I voted" on Facebook.
What does it have to do with it?
It enhanced democratic process.
But they already have to have some people, I don't want to vote because my voice doesn't matter. And when they look on Facebook, oh, I voted, but it really doesn't matter. Like, that really doesn't enhance our political
But we can
engagement.
see it does.
But what about those people that say this doesn't help me because I don't believe my voice matters through social media?
But it does, because 340,000 additional votes nationwide was accumulated. Because if someone said, like, well, I'm going to post this, whether they thought they was going to do something or not, it did, and it had an incredible enhancement.
But think about all the people that scrolls through that and like, okay, this doesn't matter.
That's so much better than no one seeing it.
You have 2 seconds left. It's okay.
There it is.
Okay. Good job.
Alright, so before I even start, I just want to say thank you for coming out. I see all these faces and it's awesome because it's probably like the largest crowd, as Cassie had said. I want to say thank you for your support. In the Parakeet. Yeah. So anyways, I'm going to start now. Ready?
Yeah.
Once again, we affirm that social media is necessary for democracy because it is effective in increasing the democratic process. And let's realize that the definition of democracy is the role of the majority. In other words, people make the decisions. What I'm hearing the opposition stress about is things like fake news, manipulating users, but that does not seem to be the case, and they provide no evidence towards exactly how, when clearly on our case, 340,000 additional votes were generated from a Facebook post. So it's simply the opposite. And if any case, I have some research from the Pew Research Center, data I should say, that states that only 9% of Americans have ever shared fake news, not knowing that it was fake news. So that's a very, very low portion. And I'm willing to admit that there are costs to social media, but that doesn't simply outweigh the benefits. And which is another issue my opponents just seem to not understand. What happens if we do remove social media from main news? Will it truly benefit our democratic process? Now this is a roadblock, again, they realize will never happen, as they provide no alternative to behind their logical assumptions. And I think that we forgot that social media is the new kid on the block. So that means that people are starting to adapt to it and will continue to adapt to it. While social media becomes more prominent, people's awareness increases. And luckily, we are here to provide you facts and not feelings. And the evidence shows that social media increases our democratic process. So again, the problem that we face with social media is human behavior, which does raise issue, but it's even being solved by the users themselves. And social media is diversifying its grounds to allow a greater channel for political engagement. Social media platforms aren't destroying our democratic process. If anything, they're helping raise the concern and the interest of people to participate in the democratic process. A study titled, "Does Social Media Promote Democracy? Some Empirical Evidence," analyzes relationship between social media and democracy out of a cross-section of 125 countries. Now this study closely examines Facebook's penetration model on a democracy index, which states that the marginal effect of Facebook's penetration is greater influenced by lower income countries. This is great because it shows how social media has an effective means on democracy. And it's because of social media that it's not only generating a benefit towards well-established nations like the United States, but it's also helping third world countries to interact in a democratic process that allows for its country's citizens to take action and raise concerns. This study also states that Facebook's penetration is associated with an 11-point improvement for lower income countries, and the effect also had an 8-point increase globally. Now, this is measured again through that democracy index, which focuses on the influences of pluralism, civil liberties, and political culture. Now, along with this, I want to focus on, or look closely at two examples. First being the Arab Spring. There was countries like Libya, Tunisia, and Egypt where the citizens used social media as their primary resource to overthrow their corrupt government's regime, to which in this case, social media allowed for those voiceless citizens to stand up and make change for their suppressive state. This, my friends, is the living example of a democracy, where the people play a vital role in their society. Secondly, another example takes place here at home in the United States against the zero tolerance policy, where a Facebook fundraiser had actually helped raise $15 million, to which helped bail out families at the border and gave them legal representation. Now, this was reported by the Washington Post. And look, we can continue to look at numerous examples and studies on how social media increases the democratic process, which is ultimately what we are in pursuit of. Now, again, we believe that social media is necessary for democracy because it is effective in improving our democratic process. Social media was all along the missing piece of the puzzle to our democracy, to the power of the people that provides unity under one and is the living essence to a true democracy. Social media once was just a playground for entertainment, but now it's evolving to something much greater that enables people like you to engage in a greater democratic process. So if you believe in the future, then you believe that social media is necessary for democracy. Thank you.
Social media platforms today rule by absolute power, rolling out new rules, banishing members, and acting as the ultimate arbitrator about what information can be discussed or consumed, and what is airbrushed from existence with little recourse for those affected. Yes, democracy is about being for the people, but how can a platform that rules by absolute power assist in the operation of a democracy that is based on consensus and collaboration? One could say that social media transforms democracy into a dictatorship. Yes, social media does give everyone a voice. However, some people don't feel comfortable enough to speak their truth because they are afraid of getting attacked for their opinions. Politics, for example. According to the Pew Research Center, 64% of social media users feel that people refrain from speaking their minds about political issues on social media out of concern that they will lose friends or get criticized. This brings up the issue of cyberbullying. Yes, social media does grant access, however, that access is limited. To further explain, as a viewer, you are only seeing what you choose to see, and even those in charge filter information for the viewer. It's called a filter bubble. According to The Conversation, legal scholar Lawrence Leswick and Sunstein had identified this phenomenon of group isolation on the internet in the late 1990s. Facebook, for example. The targeted advertising behind Facebook's newsfeed helps create such filter bubbles. Advertising on Facebook works by determining its users' interests based on the data it collects from their browsing likes and so on. To elaborate more, little pop-ups viewers see when they are scrolling down their newsfeed is pre-selected from Facebook and is meant to filter the majority. However, sometimes individuals don't necessarily take the time to understand and comprehend what they are liking and reposting. A lot of individuals like it because a friend shared or tagged them in it. However, Facebook, for example, takes it literally and thinks this is what the majority wants to hear. Not to mention, Facebook depends on advertising for its revenue, so that advertising can be readily exploited. More specifically, the site wants to keep users online and knows that it is able to manipulate the emotions of its users, who are the happiest when they see things they agree with. Inside a filter bubble, individuals basically receive only the kinds of information that they have either pre-selected or, more ominously, that third parties have decided they wanted to hear. This possesses a lot of problems. First, there is never any independent verification of that news. This brings up the problem of fake news. If you are just getting access to information that you agree with, for the most part, you won't challenge the news and consider the possibility of that news to be fiction. Yes, social media can be considered the biggest source of news for people around the United States. In fact, 2/3 of Americans get at least some of their news from social media outlets. This means that 2/3 of Americans get at least some of their news from highly curated and personal black spot algorithms. Yes, users are exposed to content of content of questionable accuracy, including conspiracy theories, clickbait, hyperpartisan content, and even fabricated news reports. Because at the end of the day, low credibility content spreads just as easily as high quality content. So while social media does give you access, however, is that access reliable? Individuals who want independent confirmation will have to actively go seek it out themselves. Inside the filter bubble, individuals can be subjected to confirmation bias, the tendency of people to seek out only information they agree with. According to the conversation, confirmation bias also limits people's ability to question information that confirms or upholds their beliefs. In fact, research at Yale University Culture Cognition Project strongly suggests that people are inclined to interpret new evidence in light of beliefs associated with their groups. According to the Scientific American, researchers have found that it is possible to determine the political leanings of a Twitter user by simply looking at the partisan preferences of their friends. For example, according to the conversation, a writer at Wired observed that he never saw a pro-Trump post that had been shared over 1.5 million times. Neither did any of his liberal friends. They saw only liberal-leaning news on their social media feeds. The tendency to evaluate information more favorably if it comes from within their own social circles creates echo chambers that are ripe for manipulation, either consciously or unintentionally. This will help explain why so many conversations is devolved into us versus them confrontations. Because of confirmation bias, polarized groups are created. According to Sunstein, group polarization is a phenomenon which takes hold when like-minded people talk to one another and end up thinking a more extreme version of what they thought before they started to talk. Because of group polarization, people aren't challenging their existing beliefs. A lot of individuals are using social media as a confidence booster, not as a tool of gaining more insight.
Okay, so we're gonna have our next crossfire.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
You only talked about how voting is better because of social media. What other ways does social media enhance democracy?
Well, I didn't just mention voting as a general basis. Now, that was one of our main points that we did claim. But when we look at it globally, as far as the efforts that have been made throughout different countries, the freedom of assembly, which is guaranteed here in the United States, but in general, social media has guaranteed it for other citizens in other countries that don't even have those rights. So it's enabling people, like, again, I mentioned the Arab Spring, those countries where they have dictatorships, like you mentioned, and they're suppressing their voices. They were actually, in turn, able to use social media to have a voice and stand up against their government. So that is a true form of democracy. And that doesn't necessarily target voter participation. It's more of just freedom of assembly in general.
But wouldn't you agree that in democracy, politics is not just politics is a big part of democracy, but there are other parts of democracy not including politics.
Well, you'd have to define what are the other parts then. I mean,
Say for example, like human morale, like you mentioned, like everyone being able to speak their minds and stuff. But when people speak their minds, like some people feel attacked, like I mentioned, like 64%, like I mentioned earlier, of social media users feel that people refrain from speaking their minds about political and on social media and other concerns because they feel like they'll lose friends or get criticized. And like I feel like this goes more into it, not only related to politics. Like if someone speaks on abortion and they're not
look, I get what you're trying to say, but you just even mentioned about giving people the freedom to speak. So how does social media not give that? And then you were talking about how it's authoritarian. Well, if you take that away from them, wouldn't that be authoritarian because you're suppressing their voices?
Awesome. Our third speaker. Whenever you're ready, ask one.
So, my opponents on the other side of the table are claiming that cyberbullying is a problem, algorithms is a problem, the networks, like there's also a problem, and like fake news is like another major problem, like for Facebook and stuff. But as I noticed, they mentioned to give a definition for algorithms, for cyberbullying. Networks is another important because networks can be a broad thing, so they failed to give a definition of that. They didn't explain to you guys what all of these meanings are. And so for all of these reasons, that should be thrown out of the debate because they failed to mention the definitions. And I will explain I will explain why how Facebook is combating fake news. So it's not really a big problem like they say it is. Okay. So now my 2 points is first, I'm gonna say social media platforms how to remove harmful media. I'm gonna talk about how it's, like they're fixing the problem of fake news. And my other point is how social media platforms encourage young adults to become more political active. Like they can be like use. Yeah, I'll explain that later. So first, by harmful media, these include things such as fake news, hate speech, and other social media that can potentially encourage other unethical agenda. Various social media platforms have devoted to eliminating offensive content, so that could destroy the democratic process. So that's how it goes. Now this is my point how Facebook is combating the fake news and all that stuff. It's by in September, Facebook have removed 1.7 billion of fake accounts and harmful content. So when you search it, you're gonna find this stuff. So that's how they can remove like people who create like accounts to have like fake news. They cannot find it. So that's how a big reason like Facebook is removing that. Another thing is like Facebook is removing content, controversial content like terrorist post content. They remove 98.5% of all terrorist contents. And also Instagram removed 92.2% of the content. So this shows that Facebook is trying to eliminate all the sensitive topics to protect the people. It's not other this. There's also Facebook is also eliminating other contents like drug sales, child pornography, and suicide was also removed from their platform. So they're trying to have a free zone, like so all of this harmful stuff, so people cannot be able to search. But one of the major topics is the Facebook is also removing 2.3 million of firearms sales posts or search. This is a big topic because like right now there's a lot of shootings. So if they remove that, like people cannot like they don't have to be like they cannot like want to do it because they're not gonna show in the content. And all of these statistics happen in the third quarter of this year. Now, for my second point about how social media is influencing more young adults to be more political active, is while fake news is being removed, as I mentioned, social media is also helping your audience to get more active in the democratic process. Social media platforms don't promote political agenda, but they allow for users to create and engage in political agenda. For example, a study from a three-way panel they published by the Journalism of the Listing examines the effects between social media and political participation on young adults. In this case, we're going to look and it's looking closely at group ages of 18 to 29 people from South Korea, where platforms such as Facebook, now we're using a new platform, Twitter, where you showed that interactive social media possibly associated with offline political participation. So these students, they didn't use social media. They went outside because they believe in their political beliefs. So they went outside and be political active. So social media is not the cause of this. They also look closely at students attending Hong Kong University, where informational use of Facebook increased the political participation. So this is like saying like the people went in here to use like Facebook to see.
dictate what to have you see on your newsfeed. You can search things on Google, another social media page, or anything on the internet or your phone. And things like Facebook will access that, and that is what the prompt will be put on your feed. So that's the algorithm that our second speaker spoke about. And regarding fake news, with the algorithm, it was actually an article from The Atlantic that stated social media engages viewers in a way that designers call flow, a psychological idea adopted a digital design strategy by video games. Flow focuses on keeping the user moving from one element to the next repeatedly in search of gratification from the act of consuming media rather than engaging with its content. Meaning social media is all about clickbait, or the algorithm that was built on Facebook. Whatever someone uses social media apps or the internet to use, more of it is what is going to be advertised on your newsfeed. So it's not looking into whether it's true, whether you're really interested. It's about, have you searched this before? For some reason you have interest in it, so we're going to show you more to keep it going, because that is how they make their money. Is the longer you stay on, the more money they make. And with fake news comes the problem of credentials. And credentials get lost within social media because when you see posts, you forget to ask yourself questions like, who is the person posting the information, where did they get their information, or who or what are the sources that got the information. All aspects of gathering information when researching, for instance, one is told not to use search engines such as Wikipedia because people can go on there and change things or make their own posts, so it's no longer credible. So social media is the same way. Anywhere you can go and make a post and pretend to be knowledgeable on a subject or anything, and people are going to view it and people are going to respond to it. An unspoken rule of social media means that one with the most following is the most credible. Social media has become a power struggle within society, so freedom of speech is challenged, which actually diminishes democracy. If it's breaking democracy down, then how is it necessary? And then current events commonly on social media turn into venting. So from what's supposed to be informational or an actual political discussion turns into a big case on opinions. Because the point of social media is to give views, to get likes, to get shared, because the more followers you have, the more people respond to you, the more people assume that you know what you're talking about because more people are responding to you. Instead of actually going to get a credible site, they're going to follow a celebrity or somebody who has 9 million viewers on YouTube or following on Twitter or something like that. And on the subject of hate speech, the problem with hate speech on social media is hate speech is more of an idea. It's not a literal. You can look up what hate speech is, but there is not a literal fact of how to determine what is hate speech and what is not. Is it giving your opinion or are you bashing? Basically, it's a problem with social media because nowhere in Facebook's code of conduct does it say that you cannot perform hate speech. It talks around the subject of it. For instance, it quotes that you are in breach of the code of conduct if you threaten, stalk, defame, defraud, degrade, victimize, or intimidate an individual or group of individuals for any reason, including on the basis of age, gender, disability, ethnicity, sexual orientation, race, or ammunition or firearms. But nowhere does it say hate speech literally is not allowed, because you can always appeal hate speech with saying that's just an opinion, I'm not bashing. And people always wonder, because of the code of conduct, how do people get away with hate speech so much? Because it states in the code of conduct, quote, Microsoft reserves the right to amend or change the code of conduct for any service at any time without notice, and they encourage you to periodically review the guidelines to ensure you are in compliance. So it is up to you to make sure you are in compliance, so that they have not changed the code of conduct and that you are not in breach of it.
So this is the Grand Crossfire?
Yes, this will be the Grand Crossfire for 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Can I ask the question first? Okay, so you say that hate speech is not explicitly stated and banned on platforms like social media. But hate speech is also not explicitly banned in the real world in our democracy. It's perfectly legal to be racist, as sadly as sad as that is. So why is things like hate speech a unique argument against social media versus just say, because there was hate speech before there was social media. I don't see why you're arguing that social media is suddenly degrading democracy.
Because when you can take something as strong as, such as like politics, because it is such a strong part of democracy, when it's something like presidential debate or like picking a presidential candidate to run the country, somebody sitting there bashing your candidate is gonna have a very big influence on society. So hate speech is not just simply, I don't like your candidate, it's going and digging up dirt on them, it's going to get put in their personal life.
So why can't you do that without using social media? Why is it a problem of social media, not a problem of humanity?
It's a very big problem in humanity, but the focus today is social media, so that's why we're saying that social media so bad.
So just communication hurts social media or hurts democracy? If people make hate speech and social media is communication, why is it social media's fault that there's hate speech?
It's not social media's fault, but the fact that it's such a big part of social media diminishes the idea of democracy.
So are you saying that we should disable people then because hate speech is gonna continue? Because like you're not providing an alternative. You're just saying that yeah, hate speech is bad, and I get that. Like there's costs and benefits to everything, but you're not showing how exactly. You're not giving a direct example to how that's exactly affecting our democracy. Like you said, a president can tweet out something. How is that affecting our democracy?
Well, it's actually the bigger issue of like you continue to poke holes in social media being necessary for democracy, but the real question is you're not providing an alternative to social media. If we were to get rid of it, what would be the alternative? There's always going to be something wrong with social media, but until you provide a better idea, this is the best idea.
Well, it's not really about an alternative, it's about stating that takes away from democracy, which makes social media not necessary for democracy.
What's
Because it's
better?
taken away.
Give us an example, or give us an example of hate speech that affected democracy. Is there an example? So how does that? Where's the evidence? Where is the evidence that shows that directly affected the people? Because I mean,
Everybody's idea of the fact that he gets disrespected every day, the fact that like his venting causes people to think that like he's less credible as president.
So then you're saying, but okay, your alternative is because he's ranting like that, he shouldn't be able to rant, right?
No, everybody, it's freedom of speech.
Well, then-
Everybody has a
well,
right
then-
to it.
Yeah. Well then,
Should we not
In that
exercise
vein,
that?
could the president not go on the news?
Argue that
Everybody ready?
Yep.
Okay, to start off with, we affirm the idea that social media is necessary for a democracy. Our opponents bring up at least the first part of their case, bring up this idea that their definition of necessary is very strict. Because there was no democracy before, it's not necessary. This is not really valid. Democracy is always evolving, and the best way to enact democracy is always the most necessary way to do it, especially by our definition of necessary, which is inevitable. As society progresses, as technology progresses, the idea of democracy is to have people vote, and the most people that vote, the better. In this case, we can prove social media increases literal voter turnout with an actual number. I think it was 340,000 extra votes just from Facebook alone from one program in one debate. This is, we can portray this to other arguments. We can prove that social media increases voter turnout across the board, especially that of younger voters. And we also show that social media offers a platform for people to get together to enact things, not necessarily just voting, but for example, in the Arab Spring, people can get together and enact democracy in a much more direct way, and in fact bring up democracy from where there is none. Our opponents talk about essentially Our opponents talk about social media makes people distrust the government. This is kind of, they didn't really offer like a specific, any evidence of this, they kind of just said it. I'm reading this off of their first argument. They said that basically because people can like rant on there, people don't like the government. Not liking the government is actually a pretty democratic thing, in my opinion, first of all. But they don't really show, this is common throughout their debate, they don't really have evidence linking their claims to like the status quo. They even said as far as like, I think they said something to the effect of that social media turns democracy into a dictatorship. If they can give one example of a country that became a dictatorship since social media, I would be very surprised. This is just an example of the kind of things they've been saying throughout this debate. For a while they talk about minority representation. They also don't have any evidence showing that minorities are excluded from social media. They only have evidence basically saying that hate speech is on social media, and that minorities are more affected by hate speech. This is, I mean, it's sad. It sucks that minorities are affected by hate speech, but this is not unique to social media. This is just a world problem, especially in other countries where, you know, people are like legally discriminated against. And this is sad, but does not necessarily help their argument in proving that social media is not necessary. Talk about the filter bubble for a while. This is an interesting argument. They're basically saying that people will only see stuff they agree with. I don't quite know why they say this. They even give an example that a certain percent someone who's described as libertarian saw a post, a pro Donald Trump post with only so many likes. So this is just one example that they gave themselves of people of a certain political ideology seeing a post that they don't like. I'm sure you've all seen posts that you don't necessarily agree with. It's kind of interesting to imply that you can't see stuff you agree with. If you've ever been on social media, you know that's fake. Just to conclude why we wanted to go over how our opponents did not affect our arguments at all. One, we prove voter turnout is good for democracy and social media increases political participation. Two, we prove that internet is where 56% of the world population is connected, and social media being the network for interactive discussion. Social media gives people a place to engage in raising concerns. Three, we prove social media provides an opportunity for freedom of assembly. We give examples of the Arab Spring. People can get together, and this is obviously a democratic process. It allows people to govern themselves and also get out of harsh government situations. We also talk about how, my friend Esteban here talks about how social media platforms can already remove a lot of deliberately harmful things. So it's not like you could post, you know, like actual, like, you know, we talked about child pornography, we talked about suicide, we talked about, you know, like drug selling. Like a lot of social media is regulated to most of the actually bad things. Just because they don't necessarily regulate hate speech is probably by definition because it's not illegal to have hate speech if you know it's bad. And social media isn't responsible for regulating humanity because no one else is anyways. In relation to our first point, we also show that young adults also become politically interested via social media. And this is necessary because democracy needs to have the most voters to be real. Overall, the reason you're going to vote affirmative for the winning side is because our opponents did not effectively counter any of those arguments. They tried to basically say hate speech was bad, but they never really had any evidence backing up their claims. And for this reason, vote affirmative.
And our last speech. Bless you. Whenever you're ready, Keisha.
So to start off, we did not say that people do not like the government. We're just saying that social media can diminish their trust in the government. Also, we did not say that you only see what you want to see and what you agree with, but that social media means social media takes place in what you access, you choose to take upon yourself to go access, and that brings in more content. But whatever they're bringing in could be things like advertisement, it could be things like conspiracy theories towards the government and the nation. It's not actually bringing in helpful content towards the idea of our democracy. So social media for things such as like politics, because it is so important in democracy, it brings a very big platform. So it's not to say that social media is bad for democracy, it's that social media was not created for like things like politics and to go on there, and people probably did not expect for hate speech to be such a big thing and for fake news to be so relevant, and it's
social media and democracy don't correlate well together because that is not what it was designed for. Our houses put such an emphasis on fake news and access because of the lack of truth and limitations that diminish the idea of democracy, not just because it is a flaw with social media. Your house kept bringing up the point of voting, but although voting is a very big thing towards democracy because it's supposed to be for the people and people are supposed to have a say, but not in every case does people's votes actually determine what happens. For instance, like a presidential debate, my one vote does not go pick the president. It's about the committees and the people we voted towards. They're actually the Congress and everyone we vote for. They pick the president. Every citizen's individual vote does not pick the president because then we would have a few presidents that would not have been in line if it was actually up to everybody's individual vote. So, with all that being said, social media has definitely made a name for itself in the field of democracy, but it is not a necessity. It is actually more of a threat towards our democracy. Social media and democracy is necessary for society, and social media brings a light to our democracy, but our house negates that it's actually necessary.